Hello, and welcome. My name is Heather St. Amand, and I am one of the Campaign for Justice statewide organizers here at the ACLU of Florida. And we are here today with Hope, Hillsborough Organization for Progress on Equality. And we're super excited to hear about all the wonderful criminal justice reform work that they're doing in Hillsborough County, Florida. And I'm going to go ahead and kick it over for introduction so that we can meet um, everyone. Bernice.
Good evening. I'm Reverend Bernice Powell Jackson. I'm the pastor of First United Church of Tampa. Sherry?
Good evening. I'm Sherry Henley. I'm a member of St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Citrus Park in Hillsborough County. Thad?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Thad Barraday. I'm a member of the Justice Ministry at the Portico, which is the downtown location of Hyde Park United Methodist, a member Church of Hope.
And I'm Laurie Jones-Aluku. I am a member of the Justice Ministry at Bible-Based Fellowship Church in Carrollwood here in Tampa, Hillsborough County.
It's so wonderful to have you all with us today, and I look forward to talking with you more about the work that you're doing in criminal justice reform. First, I wanted to hear a little bit from Sherry about Hope and what you guys do.
Thank you. Hope is comprised of 25 diverse congregations from across Hillsborough County working together on issues of fairness and justice in Hillsborough County. I have two examples of what we can accomplish when we work together. In 2019, we got county commissioners to pass the Hope Affordable Housing Act that commits at least $10 million annually in the county budget to create and rehab housing that's affordable for working families and seniors with low and very low incomes. So far, $25 million has been put into the county's Hope Fund. Another thing we've worked on, and particularly the last 3 years, we have won youth civil citations, which have prevented almost 1,000 children in Hillsborough County from getting lifelong criminal records for minor offenses. In June of 2021, we got local stakeholders to greatly expand the youth civil citation policy again. And so now civil citations are mandatory for all first-time misdemeanor offenses by children. Since then, we're starting to see more eligible children receive civil citations instead of getting arrested. Our current work is focused on addressing concerns around mental health and addiction, adult arrests for minor offenses, racial profiling, and the environment. We achieve long-term changes through an annual 3-step process. First, we listen to our members' stories and concerns. Second, we research the local problem and the research-proven long-term solutions. We bring these solutions to our Nehemiah Action, where we engage decision makers face-to-face in front of the power of 2,000 people to win systemic changes. Then, lastly, we monitor these commitments from decision makers to make sure that they do what they say.
Wonderful. You guys have done some really wonderful work. I'd love to know how you each got involved in this work. Sherry, how did you get involved?
Well, I have a family in my church that I've known for now 20 years. And the first 12 years that I knew them, when their children were small, they moved 11 times those first 12 years chasing rent. The parents were employed but had very low paying income. And I just watched that happen and saw that the children had to move schools every year, a different house every year, and what that did to just, make it hard on that family.
Well, thank you for all you do. Thad, how did you get involved?
Well, I came to this walk in a couple different ways, but through my church at the Portico, we started asking serious questions I guess 2 summers ago, following the killing of George Floyd, and wondering how we can be more involved and what we can do as a largely white, privileged congregation to be more supportive of this movement. As a result, I became the leader of the Justice Ministry at Hyde Park and the Portico. We met with people who were different than us. We engaged in courageous conversations to learn what it was like growing up Black in America. And I'm now working full time as an advocate on criminal justice reform. So these issues are very close to my heart.
That's wonderful. These conversations are so important. Laurie, how did you get involved and why is this important to you?
First of all, I would have to say that I'm glad Sherry brought up the work about the youth civil citations. So a few years ago, I heard the Justice Ministry at my church talking about how they're pushing to increase youth civil citation. My son is a young Black man in Tampa. He's got friends. And I know that that's a problem when they're, teenagers, they do silly things, they get in trouble. So that's what first drew me to the Justice Ministry. And I stay because the work that's being done, just not just for the youth, but for everyone in the county. That impacts everybody, not just our youth. But personally, my son, the youth civil citations really touched at my heart.
Well, thank you for all the work you do. And Reverend Bernice?
Well, when I came to my church, they were already involved in Hope. They've been involved in Hope for, I don't know, more than 20 years. And I personally have really been interested in working on racial justice issues and in particular criminal justice issues for probably the last 30 years. It's a big, big problem. And so we have to attack it one bite at a time. And we've been very successful in doing that here in Hillsborough.
Yeah, that's a really great point. At the ACLU, we have the same philosophy, and you got to take it a bite at a time. You have to work on certain things and then carve your path forward. Well, thank you so much, you guys, for sharing that. So I guess what I wanted to ask you about, you have talked about the work that you're doing as it pertains to racial profiling. Lori, could we talk a little bit more about that? Why did Hope get involved with racial profiling?
Definitely don't mind sharing that. So every year we have what we call a listening gathering where we listen to the concerns of the people in the community. So over the years, I've been involved 3 or 4 years, but the stories go back longer than that. And we hear stories from about people getting unnecessarily stopped because of the color of their skin and the fear and the mistrust that's in the community, um, that's caused by those stops. These are the stories that we've decided that we're going to try to address. And of course, after the George Floyd incident, that just, inspired us to work harder on addressing those issues. And it also made it very clear to us that it's important to hear those stories from the people in our communities, no matter who they are. We have to hear their stories and address them.
Absolutely. Speaking on that, what are some of the experiences and some of the stories that you have heard?
Well, I think for me personally, a couple of people stories have stood out in my mind. And there's one gentleman who's a member of not my congregation, but he owns a used car dealership. And I remember when we were, meeting in person and just having these discussions and listening to stories, he shared a story about how he's been stopped. He gets stopped so many times a year, 7 times in 1 year. And one time in particular, when he shared the story, he had tears in his eye. His daughter was there, and his 12-year-old daughter saw this happening. And of course, when this happens to you so frequently, maybe you don't think about it when it's just you, but when your child sees that happening to you, it is just really, really sad. And then, of course, my son. Oh my goodness, he and his friends actually, and his wife, they get stopped all the time, just for minor reasons. Um, but then we oftentimes think of it being a young people are getting stopped, like my son and his daughter. Yeah, they get stopped. But one of the members of our congregation, they're a retired couple. They live in Hillsborough County. They get stopped several times a year outside of their neighborhood. Just in general, the questions are, where are you coming from? Where are you going? Those questions are, first of all, it's not that they're stopped and given a reason for the stop, but being questioned as if they don't belong in their own neighborhood, which is really sad. So that's just a few, but we have heard many stories.
That is awful. So what have you learned about the problem of racial profiling?
Well, in our county, what we've learned is that there is no real tracking or analyzing of all traffic stops that are happening. So the stories we've heard about the people being stopped and let go, those are the stories that we're pressing our law enforcement about, but there's no data on that because we definitely learned from them that they only track situations where the person is given a warning, a citation, or if they're arrested. So, for example, you know, my friend at church, when she and her husband are stopped a few times a year, they're not really doing anything wrong, so they don't really get a warning. They're just let go, and there's nothing recorded about that. So we've learned that from speaking with our law enforcement that there's no tracking, and if there's no tracking, there's definitely no analyzing any data to see if there's a problem or see where there is a problem.
Obviously, that shouldn't be happening.
Right.
But what do you see as a potential solution?
One of the solutions that we really are really pushing is we're pushing our law enforcement agencies to start to a process of tracking the data. So we met with Dr. Jack McDevitt, who's at Northeastern University, and we learned from him that he's worked with hundreds of law enforcement agencies across the country to actually help them track and analyze data on all traffic stops. And then he helps them by communicating that data to the public. So that tracking, what they learn, they actually share that with the public. Once they have that data, they can address patterns of behavior that are happening that, and then take any necessary steps. Um, I think the one thing that came to mind that Dr. McDevitt shared with us when he visited or when we met with him is that even in one agency that really didn't have a lot of records or a lot of stories of complaints, by tracking all the stops, they were able to see one officer as an outlier who was stopping people in a certain zip code, and that helped them to his superiors to address that because it showed a pattern. Even though they weren't really getting a lot of complaints, they were able to use that data to, in a way, just manage that one officer's behavior. And I'm sure there were others, but he stood out. So they used that data to figure out why he's stopping certain people certain times a day in certain neighborhoods. But in our situation, if we don't have the right data, you're just never going to be able to know what's happening except for the stories that we're hearing. Or like our law enforcement folks tell us, well, we're stopping them, and if we don't think we have a problem, so it's very easy to dismiss these stories or turn a blind eye to what people are saying is happening to them over and over. So we're really pushing them to work with Dr. McDevitt to set up a simple tracking of all stops, which has been done in several law law enforcement agencies across the country very successfully.
I agree that would be the great solution, because that would provide accountability, which they currently do not have because they're not tracking it. So
That's right.
thank you for
That's
that.
absolutely right.
I wanted to now kind of switch gears and move on to the subject of adult arrests. And Thad, I was going to talk to you about that. Why did Hope get involved with adult arrests?
Well, obviously, reducing adult arrests being the gateway of entry into the criminal justice system, our goal is we would like to minimize adult arrests wherever possible. And we started working with our 10 sister organizations across the state of Florida. We have Hope, we're focused in Hillsborough County, but we have sister organizations throughout the state. And we started learning, how can we reduce the number of adult arrests for minor offenses. And as we have progressed in our learning, we have narrowed our focus around issues related to driver's licenses. So situations where arrests occur based on suspended or expired licenses, sometimes even failure to notify DHMV of a change of address, driving without a valid license, sometimes clerical type housekeeping issues that really do not have an impact on public safety, and therefore we feel should not result in someone entering the criminal justice system by being arrested.
I absolutely agree with you. At the ACLU of Florida, one of the things that we are working on in our campaign for justice is driver's license suspension reform, and all these driver's licenses that are being suspended for things that are not driving related issues. Driver's license suspensions should be reserved for folks that are a danger to others on the road, for things that are actually driving offenses. So thank you for telling us about that. What are some of the experiences that you've heard as you've been doing this work, as it pertains to adult arrests?
Yeah, we've had people share about their own experiences or experiences with folks they know in our member congregations and in our broader community, where they have in fact gotten their licenses suspended without knowing that had occurred. Sometimes it's based on a clerical issue, sometimes a problem with insurance, maybe a payment didn't go through, or a person moved and didn't get their renewal notice, or sometimes they just failed to notify DHMV of their new address after they moved. And so then they can actually wind up getting arrested for unknowingly driving with the suspended license. So not only is it not traffic or safety related, or dangerous criminals who are out there getting arrested, these are people we've heard from who have gotten arrested when they didn't even know that their license had been suspended. So it's purely by accident.
I know that with a lot of those driver's license suspensions, it's for court costs and fees for things that, as we've stated before, have nothing to do with driving. And actually, the clerk of the court has the power to make payment arrangements that are affordable to folks. Like, they have that power. So
yeah, and we're quite fortunate in Hillsborough County, where we have a county clerk of court who will work with us, as well as a state attorney who is a reformer in this area. So, and we have been pleased to work with both the clerk of court and the state attorney to help advance reformed and progressive thinking in this area. And yet it still is a challenge statewide, obviously, and even here at home, where we are seeing arrests for driver's license related issues that we would hope to minimize and avoid.
absolutely. So what else have you learned about the problem of adult arrests?
So we've studied some data that I'd like to summarize for you, which again we obtained from the county clerk of court here in Hillsborough County. So this is Hillsborough County data for 2019. And I'll try not to get too bogged down in data. We know sometimes in this space we can get a little data centric, and sometimes the devil's in the details. But we found that there were 30,000 misdemeanor arrests in Hillsborough County. And if you pause right there and just think about that number alone, 30,000 arrests for misdemeanors. It's a lot. But here's what we found that's even more alarming. In Hillsborough County, based on the data we analyzed, Blacks are 2.5 times more likely to be arrested than whites. And in Tampa, where we're located, it's even a little worse. Black people are 3.5 times more likely to be arrested than whites. So that's just not in proportion to the population, and it's obviously a source of concern. Further, of the top 6 misdemeanor charges, 4 were related to driver's licenses. So driving without a valid license, suspended, canceled, or revoked license for a first conviction, and other driver's license related offenses that are apparently clerical in nature. So these charges together make up around 30% of the total misdemeanor charges. So out of the 30,000 misdemeanor arrests, 30% seem to be related to driver's licenses. And for driving with a suspended license, as I mentioned, Blacks are more likely to get arrested. They make up 17% of the population, yet 45% of the arrests. So arresting someone for non-violent, non-safety related offenses is a major contributor and onboarding ramp to the criminal justice system. And we often talk about the poverty to prison pipeline, and this is how it's getting started right here in our own location, in our own neighborhood.
Absolutely. What do you see as a potential solution?
So we have been very involved in helping our county to institute an adult civil citation program. This is basically a diversion program that gets you out of the funnel of being arrested, prosecuted, and possibly jailed. And we would like to include, no surprise, more driving license related offenses in the adult civil citation program. Well, while we've made a lot of progress on this program through the years, we want to push to the next level. We are studying the solutions that other areas around the state, like Miami-Dade and Sarasota, have instituted. And currently here in Hillsborough, our program excludes all driving related offenses. We feel if other communities can find ways to expand the zone of those offenses that are eligible for civil citation and thus diversion out of the criminal system, we'd like to expand the scope of offenses here in Hillsborough County too. So we are currently working with local law enforcement, with local leaders of the law enforcement community and other groups in our region and in our state to expand the adult civil citation program to include driving related offenses.
I think that's a great solution for that. I did have a follow-up question that I wanted to ask. As far as racial profiling goes, what we were just speaking of, how do you relate that to this, as far as adult arrests go?
So it's interesting, if you are a victim of racial profiling and you're pulled over, perhaps without a lawful basis, perhaps on a pretext, perhaps for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or just looking like you're not the right member of the community in which you're stopped, these types of technical violations and offenses might well very often be the type of citation that gets issued and could result in arrest and could result into entry into the criminal justice system. So the two issues are definitely related. Obviously, I mean, it's hard to draw a causal connection, and our experience on racial profiling, I mean, we have a lot of experience on it, so I don't want to say it's just anecdotal, but we are working to build our knowledge base of data that evidences racial profiling. And the misdemeanor arrest information that I just summarized in 2019 would certainly indicate that if it's not a racial profiling issue, at least in operation and outcome, the system is not working in a fair fashion. It appears biased. Whether we can work backwards from that to extrapolate to someone's motives about profiling, well, that's a little harder to do, but we have our concerns.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that. I wanted to move on just to criminal justice, the work that you're doing in criminal justice reform as a whole. And I'm going to come to you, Bernice. Do you collaborate with other organizations on criminal justice reform work?
Yes, we certainly do. I think Thad mentioned earlier that we have a statewide collaborative of sister organizations that have been focused on criminal justice reform, and we've been working together, I don't know, the last 7 or 8 years. And right now, we started out working on youth civil citations, and right now we're working on reducing adult arrests in our local communities, just as we're doing here in Hillsborough. The statewide collaborative is looking across the state at that.
Oh, that's wonderful. So we've understand that you've done a lot of work around reducing youth arrests. Can you tell us about this work and what you've accomplished and what still needs to be done?
Sure. So when we first started working on youth civil citations statewide, uh, the law was written so that youth civil citation, we were trying to get them to expand from one time first time misdemeanor offenses to expand it up to 3 offenses. And so we were going back and forth to Tallahassee for several months from all across the state. Even some of our sister organizations from Miami drove up to Tallahassee. That's a long way to drive. But we were going back and forth during the legislative session. And many folks told us it wasn't going to happen. Since it was already on the books, youth civil citations, they weren't going to expand it. But lo and behold, they did. And so we were very successful in making that happen. In Hillsborough, we've had a program for youth civil citations for a long time. But nevertheless, thousands of our children were being arrested every year who should have been eligible for a civil citation program. And we first got the decision makers, the stakeholders, if you will, here in Hillsborough, to make possession of misdemeanor marijuana be an eligible offense, because when we looked at the data, we realized that 70% of the children in our county were being arrested for that one offense. Whereas across on the other side of the bridge in Pinellas County, those children were getting civil citations. So we were able to get that expanded. And then from there, they expanded it to even other offenses, and then we began to push them to change what domestic disputes. So that's like a sibling fighting with another sibling. How many of us have been in fights with our siblings or had our children be in fight? And so there were children being arrested in that situation. We got them to really expand that and include that as an offense for civil citations as well. And that started this summer. And then this last year, also, they expanded it to all, in Hillsborough County, to all first-time misdemeanors. The Department of Juvenile Justice in the state does a really great job of tracking all of this. And so all the numbers that we use are the DJJ numbers so that we're comparing apples to apples. We can compare ourselves to Sarasota County or Lee County or some other county. Our state attorney's office also here in Hillsborough does a good job at looking why children are being arrested if they're eligible for a civil citation. And those numbers are indeed dropping of the children being arrested. There is still a problem. We're not at 100% where we should be, or we should be close to 100%. We might never reach 100%, but Pinellas, for instance, is way up in the 90s. And what we're seeing is that most of the arrests are happening now because a child, quote, isn't showing remorse, or they just tag it as unknown. And we see that as a huge problem because what does that mean? Isn't showing remorse. And why wouldn't you know? The law says you have to give them a civil citation. And so why is it, why are they still being arrested? You can't say it's unknown.
No, absolutely. I just wanted to say for everybody watching that our amazing panelists will be accepting questions towards the end of our conversation tonight. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask away in the comments section. And in about 15 minutes, we'll get to those questions. But what I did want to ask everyone is, what do you think that other communities can learn from what Hope has done in Hillsborough County? And this is open to whomever wants to take it.
Well, I'll start. I think one thing that we can learn is that together we can make change happen. And that, Hope is comprised of 25 congregations, as Sherry said. We don't all agree about theology. We don't all agree about a lot of things, but we all agree that there should be justice in our county. There should be equality and fairness in our county. And so we together we're strong. Together we can get our elected officials to listen to us. As frustrating as it seems these days to have elected officials who are not listening to the people, we know that it can happen when we work together.
We are absolutely stronger together.
I would just echo and jump on the bandwagon there to say there's strength in numbers. Through the 25 member congregations that we represent, we do an extensive amount of outreach through our congregations and into our community, and we get people to show up and get engaged and pay attention. I guess educate yourself and then get involved. At our, we have a very defined process for how we roll that out, starting with listening sessions, as I think Lori mentioned, and then rolling up to these committees and the meetings we hold. But it culminates with our Nehemiah Action, which is our annual convention where we get local leaders and lawmakers together in front of 1,200 or more, sometimes as many in past. COVID has had a little bit of a effect, and we were virtual last year, but we've had as many as 2,000 people together in the past, and we show our leaders that we are listening and that we are engaged and that we care, and we push them for answers. So that strength in numbers is a very powerful lesson from Hope.
If I could add one more thing too, I think having allies like the ACLU and the Fines and Fees Center and Dr. Medevitt at Northeastern, having allies who are working on this is also really important. And it brings us back to that question of working together. How do we reach beyond ourselves to other groups and other organizations as well?
I would like to say that the one thing I've learned, and others can learn from the work of Hope, what we've done in this county, is that you have to listen to the stories from people across the county. We have a diverse group of people, which is great, because if I haven't heard the story or it hasn't happened to me, then maybe it happened to a friend. And what I also find is that sometimes people think this is only happening to me. I'm the only one who's getting stopped. I'm the only one having a problem finding affordable housing. But when you start to bring thousands of people together and listen to them year after year, you hear what those stories are. And the other thing that people can learn from Hope is that we don't mind getting one no, we're still going to be persistent. Going back, and
Yeah.
I don't know who can talk about the Affordable Housing Fund, but how many years it took and how many no's? Reverend Bernice probably knows. It was long before I was involved. But
When we first went to Hillsborough County and started talking about affordable housing, they said to us, it's not really a problem here. Nobody else is talking about it. And we said, you got a list of 100,000, over 100,000 families in this county waiting for affordable housing. We're talking about it and you need to talk about it. And that's how long, but she's right. You have to keep going back over and over.
yeah.
And to that point, in the area of criminal justice reform, what we're talking about tonight, we know that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And Hope has been doggedly, persistently working at these issues locally for years to make the progress we've made. But we know we're not done yet. We're we may be halfway through or less. And we're going to keep going until we create meaningful justice and reform in our community. And to that point, I also work in Tallahassee at the state level, where it can often be very difficult, and progress comes, if at all, in small spurts, and you have to be constantly vigilant against backsliding. And one of the nice things that I really enjoy about working with Hope is proving that we can make a difference locally, and showing that we can actually improve our community right here in our own backyard, and we don't need someone in the capital or a far off city to tell us that we can do it. We just can't.
And I'll also add, we have worked long time with all of our stakeholders in Hillsborough County. We have a good working relationship with them, with respect both ways. We come prepared. We ask intelligent questions, and we bring impressive data. And so over the years, they have we have all established a good working relationship with lots of respect going both ways.
Wonderful. So the state of Florida as a whole, are you hopeful that our state can move towards meaningful criminal justice reform? And what do you hope to see during this current legislative session?
Well, we don't have any bills that we're trying to get passed this time, like we did with the youth civil citations when we were trying to expand that. So there are several criminal justice bills, I think, there in the committees, but we don't have any bills that we are particularly working on. I don't know. The last year they weren't too successful in getting meaningful criminal justice reform bills passed. There were some that were introduced, but they never really saw the light of day, I don't think. So I don't know whether it'll be different this year or not. I'm not real hopeful myself, but I'm not sure. Thad may know more.
Well, there is reform pending on fines and fees for juveniles, and we're hopeful that in the context of juveniles, it will be non-controversial to exempt them from the impact of these draconian fines and fees, which, I mean, these are kids, so why should they be getting subject to these punishing burdens that just they can't afford, and then become a gateway, opening the door to the poverty to prison pipeline. So that's one. There was legislation passed unanimously by both chambers for expungement, again, in the areas of youth. Unfortunately, that bill was vetoed after adoption. I understand it has been reformed now to conform with the concerns that the governor had And so that will hopefully be adopted. And, Florida has a terrible crisis in its Department of Corrections and in its prison systems. The infrastructure is collapsing. They're having to close facilities. They're having a huge problem with retention of Department of Corrections officers. And that was discussed quite extensively in committee hearing this week. Again, as Reverend Brady said, whether they will, as I said, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So we have to be patient. Whether they will actually make any meaningful corrections or reforms this session remains to be seen. We're just at the outset here, but we're all working very hard to try and make that happen.
Well, I just want to thank you all again for the work that you're doing. And just another general question for all of you. What is the most important lesson that you've learned while being an advocate for criminal justice reform?
So I've been doing this about 40 years. That's a long time. I think the most important lesson that I've learned is exactly what Thad said. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. You can't lose heart. Sometimes you have to keep going back and back and back. You have to help them see the stories of the people as well as the numbers. So you can't give up. You just have to continue on, and you can make a difference. And like I started out by saying, bit by bit, how do you eat an elephant bit, one piece at a time.
I ditto. I agree with that.
Yeah, I have to agree with that also because I know sometimes I'm just like action. I just want everything to be fixed right now. But you really do have to learn that you have to approach it systematically, go back again and again, and pick your issue, and stick with that issue until it's an outcome that satisfies the needs of our community in the area of criminal justice.
There's one other thing we learned that first year that we did the expansion of youth civil citations. You never know who might be your ally. The people that you think might not be your ally might surprise you. There were some legislators that we worked on that I probably personally wouldn't have agreed on anything, even the day of the week about. But yet they were working with us on some of that. So you never know. You can't have a mindset about who your friends are and who your enemies are.
And to that point, I'd like to add that, we need to have these courageous conversations in community, wherever that may be. We have a wonderful community among our working group here on Hope. We get together on our calls, we get to know each other, we have a good time. We're very disciplined and efficient in the way that we work, but we also support each other, and we know that we are here for each other. And that helps as you're doing difficult work and sometimes scratching your head, wondering, how things can be so wrong. So I'd say I would encourage people to find their community wherever it may be, around the dinner table, at the water cooler, these days at the virtual water cooler, whether that's Zoom or other platforms. We have to find ways to engage in dialogue about these issues wherever we find people who are willing to listen. And that may include, people who are our friends, our family, our neighbors, people, in organizations. And as Reverend Bernice said, people who you don't expect, just people you never would think would be an ally or supporter, but they need to be touched by you. And we are a faith-based community, so I don't want to let the conversation close without mentioning faith. We believe that this is a calling for us, and that ability to reach out and touch our neighbor is very consistent with our faith traditions. And so, we're just carrying the message forth and hopefully being used as a vessel to do good work.
Well, thank you so much for that. So it's about time that we can start taking questions from the audience. First, while we're waiting for folks to type their questions in, I was going to ask Bernice, is there a way that folks can get in touch with Hope if they would like to?
Absolutely. They can visit our website, which is hillsborohope.org, or they can email us at hope@hillsborohope.org. And we're a congregation based, as Thad's just said, we're faith based, we're congregation based. So if you're part of a congregation in Hillsborough County, we'd love to have your congregation join us in this work. We're from all across the county. We're from all different faith organizations, faith beliefs. So you're more than welcome. And if you're in another county, you could visit the DART website. DART is our umbrella organization that we're a part of. Their website is thedartcenter.org, and there may well be an organization like ours in your community.
Okay, wonderful. We did get a question from the audience. Is there a similar reform group in Clay, Duval, or St. John counties?
I know there's one in Duval County. I can't remember about Clay or the other one, but I know there is one in Duval County. As I said, go to the dartcenter.org, and then you can find out where all the organizations in Florida are. And there are a couple that are just forming, like in Manatee County. There's one that's just forming in where I can't remember what's Tallahassee's county. Is that Lee? Anyway, Tallahassee has one that's just started. So there's several that are just forming. But if you go to the dartcenter.org, you can find them.
Awesome. Yeah, Tallahassee is Leon. So that is really good to know all that information. Thank you. Another question is, how can Hope work with the ACLU? And how do you see us all working together?
Part of our process is we do research. So Sherry mentioned that when we go to our officials, we've done our research, we've done our homework, and in understanding whatever the problem is that we're working on, whether it's affordable housing or criminal justice, whatever it is, we do a lot of research, and we go and we come to organizations like the ACLU, and we try to find out what do you know about this problem, and we share information that way. So part of how we reach organizations is through the research that we do if they're working on similar issues. In the past, we've tried to be supportive of different organizations that maybe are working on the same issues, encouraging our folks to send letters or whatnot.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. And I really appreciate all the information that you guys have shared with I know me as an organizer at the ACLU. In working with you guys, I have enjoyed it, and I do look forward to the things that we're going to do together in the future. Saying that, we do not have any more questions in the chat. So I didn't know if you guys had anything else that you wanted to share with the folks that are watching at home. Anything else that they should know related to the work that you're doing?
Well, I did want to share that Hope actually does a great job as an organization. We follow up once a commitment is made. So, for example, affordable housing, we continue to follow up, make sure the funds are being used appropriately. Even the youth civil citation, I love the way we follow up to make sure they are really doing what was agreed upon, and that will continue. Like they may agree in 2018 for something, but we just can't stop and not look back and keep looking to make sure those commitments are being kept after we have a win, so to speak.
Okay.
I'd like to add a plug. We do have our annual Hope Nehemiah Action Convention coming up on March the 28th. We hope it's going to be in person. We are still working out the details of that. We're watching the numbers carefully, and of course want to be cautious and prudent and safe for our members and safe for the community. But we are right now in the organization process to gather and motivate participants to attend. So we're all asked to reach out to the community, and if anyone wants to be my guest, they can come on down to help me fill up my quota for the Nehemiah Action. I'd really appreciate that. And we really would like to get a great turnout. It's a wonderful event, a chance to meet not only more folks from the community, folks from other churches in the area, but our local leaders who are really making these decisions happen on a day-to-day basis, hear from them and hold them accountable. So we hope everyone will turn out for that event on March 28th. More details will be made available soon. Probably can look at the Hope website to follow up on that.
We already have 6 or 7 of the stakeholders who have agreed to attend the Nehemiah Action. So we know that they will be attending, and we will be, asking for their work on what were some of our issues.
I'm definitely looking forward to it. This will be the first one that I've ever attended, but I'm super excited about it. Well, with that, I wanted to wrap things up. It has been really wonderful talking with you all today and sharing with folks about Hope and the wonderful work that you all have done and are continuing to do for Hillsborough County, and honestly for the state of Florida and your different alliances that you have. So,
and thank you to you and the ACLU for the work that you do as well.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. So Thank you again so much, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Everybody stay safe.
Thank you for having us.
All righty. Bye-bye.